Hi, everyone. This is the official Succession podcast from HBO and Pineapple Street Studios. I'm Kara Swisher.
If everyone's showing up to battle in armor, then I feel kind of exposed here in my loincloth.
Let's gang up on Dad and take him down.
Jesus, let me shut the door first.
Stick with me, Roman. We have something going, and I'm an incredibly dangerous enemy.
This week on Succession, we saw Logan still desperately trying to contain the chaos inside Waystar from a hotel room in Sarajevo. Meanwhile, the Roy children are all back in the same room, but it's a minefield of manipulations and mistrust.
You didn't like how I did what I did to Dad? Sure, whatever, I'm sorry. Now that's for me and him.
Well, I'm just here to spy on this one, so.
And I'm just here to get you to back down.
Feels like the kind of room that could use a psychologist.
You know, Pop's looking for you two.
Yeah, we're here on his behalf.
Oh, sure thing, honey, me too. All about Dad. That's why we're all here.
That's why Adam Grant is on the show. He's a top organizational psychologist and host of the podcast Work Life. We'll talk about living and working in a family company full of lies, narcissists, and egos, and what that actually does to your relationships and your psyche.
I don't know whether I want to call him a narcissist or a taker or just an asshole. Probably all three.
But first, power rankings. First, which of the Roys is up this week? Let's look at Kendall. Last week, he was mostly worried about his social media strategy. This week, he gets his priorities straight. He tries to bring his siblings into the fold. Together, maybe they can overthrow Logan.
I don't know what I think about Dad. I love him, I hate him. I'm gonna outsource it to my therapist, but he was gonna send me to jail.
Kendall doesn't win them over, but he's making better moves. Shiv is up too. By the end of the episode, she has a new title, Domestic President of Waystar, and a new task, keep eyes on Jerry Kelman. And what about Connor? Listen to this call with no context, and you might think things are going well for him.
Con?
Hey.
I'd just like to say, it's good to know that with everything, I can rely on you with Kenny going nut-nut.
Yeah, sure.
But Connor knows better than to believe his own father.
You're number one, kiddo. You know that.
So Kendall and Shiv are up, Connor's down. Who made the biggest power moves?
Those fucking kids of yours.
I know.
Is it Logan's estranged wife, Marcia?
For my return to be public, I will need my role on the trust finalized and improvements in my financial position.
But the boldest power move of the week has to have gone to Logan, one that says, I know what you're all doing.
Dad has sense, some perfectly innocent, and I'm sure safe to eat donuts.
I'm like 98% sure those are not poisoned.
And those are the power rankings for now.
Con, stop looking at the fucking donuts, man.
Okay, let's go back to that scene with all the 4 Roy kids. Kendall has brought everyone together and he wants to unite his siblings against his dad. Kendall's HQ is his ex-wife's home, and the only spot for privacy is in his young daughter's bedroom. Everything during this interaction feels like subtext. There is zero trust here. Let's listen.
Here we all are.
Okay, can we turn off the devices and get into this?
You know, I'm just gonna say right out that I'm a spy. I'm gonna go back and tell him everything. I'm with Dad, so yeah, fuck you.
Is this a family? Is it business? Who knows? I'm going to get into this dynamic with my guest today, Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist, professor, and podcaster. Adam's the author of a lot of best-selling books. His latest is Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. Hey, Adam, great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Kara Swisher.
So listening to that clip, this is something you're familiar with, correct?
I almost felt like I was watching scenes I'd already watched in real life, except even worse.
How much of this sounds like a family meeting, and how much sounds like colleagues debating the future of a company in crisis?
It sounds like a horrible family meeting to me.
So talk about those parallels. Talk about the idea of what happens when you mix family with business.
Well, there's this research on what Luis Gomez Mejia calls socio-emotional wealth, which is the idea that in a family firm, you're not just trying to maximize financial wealth, you're also trying to build a legacy and carry it on, and that makes everybody's identity and status that much more important. And in some ways, that drives a lot of extra motivation. People care more. They see the business as a reflection of who they are. And you get a lot more of their energy and their effort. On the other hand, they have a really hard time making reasonable decisions. And I think that in many cases, people hang on to socio-emotional wealth and destroy financial wealth.
So one of the things is they're already a family, so they bring in the history of their relationships into business. Now, everybody does this in a company. They pretend that it's all business, but it's never all business. In this case, it's all family and then business.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me as I was watching the first 2 episodes is it seems that that Logan's kids, and we see this in real life too, are ambivalent in the sense that like they're obviously Logan's. I don't know whether I want to call him a narcissist or a taker or just an asshole. Probably all 3, but. They have this relationship with him where they, on the one hand, clearly want him out of the picture. On the other hand, though, they're dependent on him and they respect some of his competence and expertise. And psychologists have been studying this for a long time. And it turns out that the worst kinds of relationships are often the ambivalent ones. In some ways, they're even worse for our health than purely negative relationships. So if the kids just hate Logan, then they're going to minimize their interaction with him. They're going to avoid interdependence with him. They're either going to do the takeover or they're going to get out of the firm altogether, right? Mm-hmm. But because they have this mix of positive and negative feelings, they're sort of always 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They're never quite sure what to expect. One day he might actually elevate them into a C-suite job. Another day they're out. And that takes a huge toll on them. And I think we can all relate to that, right? If you've ever had a boss who one day had your back and then the next day stabbed you in the back or vice versa, that's a lot more stressful if we look at the research than just having the boss who you knew was going to stab you in the back.
Right. And in the case of this family or many family companies, they're also looking for that hug they never got. I mean, one of the things I always thought if I ever interviewed Donald Trump, the first thing I'd ask him is, did your family not hug you enough? I think that's what's going on here. There's so much that feels predicated on that, like on what happened early on. And then it was mixed up in the family business.
I thought that for a long time too. And then I read this paper in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology that said that narcissism was not predicted by being neglected as a child. It was predicted by having parents who told you that you were God's gift to humanity, who essentially blew up your ego to the point that you were arrogant. And then what happens is you have these extraordinarily high opinions of yourself. You then enter a social world that's not in that family bubble. And some people think you're an idiot and other people think you're a jerk. And you end up with this very fragile ego. And so it's not low self-esteem that underpins narcissism. It's extremely high, but extremely fragile or unstable self-esteem.
So you're brought in to consult with a company in the midst of a crisis or scandal. How do you suss what's going on and who's telling the truth about what needs to be fixed?
The only way to get to the truth that I know of it is to see the dynamics in action. Mm-hmm. So one of the mistakes that a lot of consultants make is they come in, they interview everybody separately. And then you end up with a bunch of different stories and you're trying to piece them together and you don't know which ones are true and which ones are false. And at some level, it almost doesn't matter. Because you're not trying to change each individual, you're trying to change the culture and the system of the organization. So I'd want to go in, I'd want to watch some of these meetings. I'd want to see people making decisions. I want to be in the war room when they're deciding whether, Kendall should take over while Logan is potentially brain hemorrhaging or not. Mm-hmm. I think once I've observed a little bit, what I try to do then is hold up a mirror so that they can see themselves a little bit more clearly and say, look, here are my observations. I want to sprinkle in some data as well and say, these dynamics are not unique to you. And in fact, sometimes I don't start with the dynamics I see because I know that people are going to get defensive and that's going to be very threatening. What I'll do is I'll come in and say, let me tell you about another organization I worked with. And here's what was going on in their top management team. And they also had a family controlled business. Have you ever seen any of those dynamics? And I'm happy to tell you the parallels that I recognize, but I would rather let you surface them.
So that you understand them. It's like, I have a friend. I have a friend. Like, this
Exactly.
friend, not you, but a friend. So as an organizational psychologist, do you ask questions first or not at all? Just observe?
I always want to ask questions because I think even if people aren't telling me the truth or the whole truth, they're telling me something about what they want me to believe. And that gives me a window into what they care about, what they value, and what motivates them. And I need that information if I want to persuade them that they need to change their behavior. So I guess I'm using when I ask questions, I'm using the answers less to discover the truth and more to understand what makes them tick.
Is there any question you can ask that gives you that kind of insight? I can imagine you just sitting there and unnerving people, and they probably are on their best behavior when you're there, just by presence.
The first question that I like to ask is, if you were going to take over this company and you had full control, what are the first 3 changes that you would make? And what that tells me a little bit about is, 1, what they think is broken. Mm-hmm. 2, where they would, consider solving it. But 3, also, how much have they thought about running the company? Do they want the power? It's really interesting to observe when somebody says, like, I wouldn't take that one. No, thank you. It's and that's the spontaneous knee-jerk reaction. I think there's a level of humility there. I think the narcissists are much more likely to say, oh, I actually have a whole plan for how to fix this, and here's what it is. And, it's only a matter of time before people listen to me.
A lot of people say they don't want the job when they do, often women, which is Shiv is doing that in this thing, but a lot of women do this, is they're like, there was someone very prominent who then did get to be the CEO, said to me, if I'm lucky enough, they'd consider me for CEO. I said, why don't you just say you want it? Like, just, you want it, right? And she was very much like, well, if they think I'm up for the job, I'm like, do you want it or not? I find many women never say, give me that, that bowl of chocolate pudding. I want to eat it, that kind of thing.
I don't need to tell you this, but I think they're doing that because of the backlash that we've documented for decades. And when I say we, I don't mean me, right? I mean social scientists against assertive, ambitious women. I think about Laurie Rudman's research showing that women who self-promote are liked less, but not seen as any more competent, and that they're violating these ridiculous stereotypes that women are supposed to be modest and self-effacing. Mm-hmm. I think about the Laura Tiedens meta-analysis, 63 studies showing that women who are assertive are liked less in general, because they're violating another ridiculous gender stereotype that women are supposed to be communal and caring. Right. How dare you say, I want to be in charge? I'm even thinking of the data suggesting that Hillary Clinton's approval ratings went down when she was running for office and went up when she was holding office. People liked the version of Hillary that was, grasping or trying to achieve something, much less than the one who was stewarding and, helping all of us.
Putting the sunglasses on, getting on the phone. I said that to her once. I'm like, put on the sunglasses, get on the phone, and that's how people will like you. They like that, Hillary.
I mean, but should she have to do that? Of course not.
Of course not. So what do you think the biggest barriers to people being able to be honest with each other and trust and work together? Obviously, the Roy family is not like that, but what do you find to be the biggest barriers when you're looking at all this social research?
I think if I think about the barriers to trust and collaboration in a dynamic like that, I think number one is a lack of psychological safety, as Amy Edmondson would describe it, right? That people are afraid that if they speak up, they're going to be punished in some way. And sometimes that's because there's an actual history of reprisal. In other cases, right, people just walk around with these beliefs that, like, you can't cut the boss's throat. Or, if you speak up, that it's going to have career consequences. So I think that's a big problem. I think a second problem, and something I've been studying recently with Konstantinos Koudaferis, is that in a lot of cases, we get the relationship between trust and vulnerability backward. Dan Coyle wrote about this brilliantly in The Culture Code. He said, look, a lot of people think that in order to be vulnerable, you have to trust people. And it actually goes more strongly the other way, that you have to show vulnerability in order for people to trust you. You have to disclose something about yourself. And a lot of us wait until we have trust, and therefore it doesn't happen, right? We have these kind of professional, stilted conversations that actually don't reveal any depth or humanity. And then I think the last barrier that I see all the time is people just having their own personal goals that, sort of supersede group goals. There's a selfish agenda there, and people are focused on what's going to allow them to get ahead and achieve their objectives, not what's going to advance the group. And I think systematically what we see empirically is that narcissists are more likely to get promoted into leadership roles. They work a lot harder to get them. But also, their confidence gets mistaken for competence. And
Right.
people think because they exude this certainty and conviction and often charisma that they're qualified to lead. And the sad reality, and Kara, I know you've seen this probably almost every day of your career, given the kind of reporting you do, is narcissists are actually more charming than their peers on first impressions because they really want to make sure that they make a good first impression. And it's only when you interact with them for a longer period of time or up close that they reveal the full true colors.
Yes. The Roys are so adept at wielding insults. They're hilarious and also biting and quite mean, actually.
Defend Dad all you want, but Jerry can look after herself.
Yeah, I know that. I'm not defending Jerry.
You can't
I'm saying
hide
that-
under the covers with Mommy.
Oh, fuck off, Siobhan.
Oh, you love showing your pee-pee to everyone, but someday you know you're actually gonna have to fuck something.
Fuck you,
Rome.
bitch. What? Leave it.
Rome, just Rome.
That was low.
That was an overreaction. That was not.
Can we just try to keep this nice?
What function do you think this kind of vicious, humorous banter does for a group of siblings or even at work? Because it happens at work.
Well, I kind of wonder if they enjoy it. I don't think
Yeah, they
most
do.
groups are like the Roys. I think the cardinal rule of humor at work is you make fun of yourself, not other people. Although the caveat is the research by Jarrell Slaughter and colleagues would tell us that men are seen as more competent when they self-deprecate. Women are seen as less so, which is just wrong. But I guess that means it's that much harder for women to walk that tightrope. And I think in the Roy family, it seems like the humor is the way that they put up their guard and say, look, I'm not going to let you take advantage of me. And I'm basically going to twist the knife a little bit to tell you, hey, wait a minute, back off here.
But not good in the workplace.
I mean, would you want to work in that company? I wouldn't.
I have worked in companies like that, but no, no, not at all. Okay. Let me ask you another question. When you said vulnerability, what do you mean by showing vulnerability?
When I think about showing vulnerability, it's hard not to think of Brene Brown's work, right? So that usually means having the courage to disclose something about me that doesn't put my best foot forward. It may be an imperfection, could be an insecurity, could be something that's fairly personal that I haven't shared with a lot of people. And those are moments of intimacy, right, that are very uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially, white men in a work setting, right?
Right. They don't want to be seen as vulnerable.
No, not at all. I want to be strong. And yet, in these studies we recently did, we found that when we asked leaders and managers to not just seek feedback and criticism, but to actually criticize themselves out loud, that psychological safety and trust went up, and it lasted for at least a year because they weren't just claiming they were open to hearing what other people were thinking. They were proving they could take it.
In a lot of families, and this one is a good example, or the Trumps or any of these families you mentioned, they can't show any weakness. Everyone has to act tough. You can't sort of shake that from these companies.
No. Do you know Jennifer Berdahl's work on
No.
what she calls masculinity contest cultures?
Oh, well, I just interviewed Elon Musk about Jeff Bezos' rockets, so I'm kind of familiar with that. And he went right
Okay, so
there.
tell
He
me
went right
what the
there.
masculinity contest looks like.
I don't know. It has to do with measuring of some sort, of some length. That's my guess.
Yeah, I mean and I think what's interesting about that is it becomes more than a metaphor, right? So everyone is determined to be the smartest person in the room, as opposed to asking, how do we make the room smarter?
Right.
People believe in a zero-sum world where if I want to win, other people have to lose.
Right.
And I think consistently you cross the line from, I think, being demanding to being demeaning, right? Where we're gonna pummel people who don't step up and don't deliver or who show any weakness, as opposed to asking, well, what caused that, and was I a contributing factor there?
Thanks for checking in. And, I love you.
Thank you.
And do you love me too?
Why do you want to know?
Fuck, I just feel like it's a pretty important thing to know, whether you do or not.
You know, you can't just take my love and bank it and then take a view of the love market and see if you want to invest in me.
Uh-huh.
But, yeah, I do.
Great. 'Cause I do too.
Thank you. It's good to know we don't have an unbalanced love portfolio.
We've heard the rhetoric about a company being a family, which I often doubt. I always say it's not my family, Talk about that, and then the opposite when family is the company.
Well, I really worry about when people say we're a family around here, it creates unrealistic expectations for what's going to happen in the organization. I think people get fired in their jobs a lot more often than they get fired from their families, right? I think you count on your family to have your back almost no matter what. And I don't think you should expect that of your employer, right? In the US, we have at-will employment. There's no obligation for corporations to care about you at all. I understand the good intentions that leaders have when they say that. I think what they mean is we're a community, which means we're going to respect each other. We're going to enjoy each other's company. We're going to try to contribute to each other's success, even if there's not anything in it for me personally. But to say we're a family, I think you're just setting people up for disappointment, and it creates a lot of perceived hypocrisy, right? Because leaders will say one day we're a family, and then the next day, well, I guess families do sometimes scream at each other, right? But the next day they're just completely violating the basic principles of professionalism. You're like, wait a minute, what? Like, do we actually care about each other? And if so, like, why was that person demoted and why was that person fired? And I don't really get what's going on here, but clearly you are not walking your talk.
Well, one time someone said, "Oh, we're a family," and I said, "Are you going to insult my outfit right now? Because my mom just did that. Like, what are you? I don't want a family at work, and you're not my friend. You know what I mean? I have family at home, and they're enough trouble as it is. But what about when a family is a company? Talk a little bit about familial infighting when there's so much money at stake.
Yeah, I mean, we know nepotism is a huge problem in family firms. That even more than in the rest of the world, when people are born into wealth and family ties, they're much more likely to get promoted. There was a recent study which showed that second generation money managers, they end up underperforming basically relative to people who did not come from wealth. And, it's largely because you didn't have to earn the job if you came from a rich family. And I think family firms are often an extreme version of that. That's not to say that that's always the case, right? So if we go back to this idea we were talking about earlier of socio-emotional wealth, you will sometimes have a family member, whether it's a sister or a brother, or a nephew or a niece or, a grandchild, right? Who really cares deeply about extending and continuing the legacy and does it with integrity. And I think that motivation can be a real asset for an organization. Mm-hmm. I think there's often unique expertise that gets, sort of channeled through families. I worry a lot about organizational memory and how much information is lost from one generation of employees to the next. How many great ideas never saw the light of day because people weren't around 2 decades ago, and they were crazy then. And now actually we have the technology to do them. In family firms, I think those ideas are more likely to survive and get retained and passed on. And so I think, like almost everything else in life, running a family firm is a double-edged sword. It gives you a lot of assets and also a lot of liabilities.
Right. So when you're in the middle of talking to these firms or studying them, what these family firms, and they're in a crisis, is there one thing to do? Bring them all together? What is the thing to do? If you were in this bedroom with these kids, what would you say?
I honestly think that the only thing I would want to start with is conflict mediation. Mm-hmm. Even in non-family firms, there's some classic evidence that most leaders and managers spend at least a full day a week just mediating conflicts between people in their workplaces. I think we are a conflict illiterate culture. In some cases, we have horrible conflicts. In other cases, we avoid them altogether and therefore don't know how to manage them. And I actually think we see both of those dynamics, right, with the Roy family. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is I would bring in a conflict mediator. I would start with a couple of probably the pairs that were having the biggest problem. And then I would ask whether we could actually do this at the family level. And I would not have high hopes that they're going to make a lot of progress. But I think if we can't get all the issues out on the table and put our trust in a neutral third party to help us, really think through what might be fair solutions to some of these disagreements,
right,
we're not going to make any headway.
So conflict illiterate. It's interesting. You're right about spending a lot of time on conflicts. When I was managing more people, I literally got to the point where I was like, staff 0. That's what I would like. Staff 0. So how do you get literate at conflict?
Well, I would start by reading Amanda Ripley's new book, High Conflict, which I think may well be the best nonfiction book of 2021. I think she does a brilliant job unpacking the science and also some really vivid stories of what causes people to get into what she calls these high conflict loops, where it's us versus them. I'm right, you're wrong. And every single behavior that the other person does is an escalation of our disagreement. And it's not over until I've won the war and you don't exist anymore. I think that what I learned from her work and from a lot of the data on conflict is we need to be able to not reduce conflict, but have better conflict. We actually know in families that how often parents argue has no bearing on the health or well-being of their kids. It's how constructively they argue that matters.
Not just screeching at each other, but
but actually teaching their kids it's okay to disagree, right? We don't have to have all our fights behind locked doors. And in fact, if we do that, you might learn to avoid it, or you might not learn ever how to resolve it and still respect each other in the process. And so I think the key is to try to figure out how to have conflict that we would call, in my world at least, task conflict as opposed to relationship conflict, which is we're going to duke it out over a decision or a vision or a strategy, as opposed to, we start to disagree about a choice to make. And then, I'm suddenly saying, well, you know what? You smell.
Right.
You're just
you were mean
awful
to me when I was 14. I remember when you did that to me or something.
Oh,
like
the past hauntings are the worst.
Past hauntings. You have so many good words. Conflict illiterate.
This is what we do in psychology. We label things that you already know.
What is a past haunting? I love that word.
It's an old concept in psychotherapy to just describe some of your old demons that are still governing a lot of your current choices, and you haven't quite come to terms with them. So, one of mine is in middle school, a bunch of my friends dropped me because I wasn't cool enough. And I think that's one of the reasons I got so interested in being helpful to other people. It was a way to be liked and accepted. Right. And at some point I realized that, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should just help people if I enjoy it and I think it's meaningful, not because I want to be liked. And then I wasn't haunted as much by it anymore. But it still probably affects my thinking more than I would like.
I think I need to get back to the city. People need to see a little family unity.
Of course. And you do have things you could say no to stop him.
You drop some bombs, you get burnt too,
So can this family be saved? Can families this dysfunctional be saved? You just think start again.
How do you define save?
Functional.
I don't think so. I don't think they have a chance in hell, to be honest. I think part of what makes the show so captivating is I think maybe every one of them would get diagnosed with a personality disorder in real life. And I don't know how to treat that in a family system. Maybe Esther Perel does.
Oh, psychedelics.
It's out of... Yeah, that's way beyond my expertise.
Ketamine therapy. We'll talk about that next. Anyway, thank you, Adam, for sharing. It's really helpful. Adam Grant, of course, is a professor, he's a writer, and he's also the host of a terrific podcast, very popular one called Work Life. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I always learn something new from you.
Okay, that's the show. Until then.
Oh, fuck off, Siobhan.
This is the official podcast of HBO series Succession, and it's a production of HBO and Pineapple Street Studio. It's hosted by Kara Swisher. Our executive producers are Gabrielle Lewis, Barry Finkel, Max Linsky, and Jenna Weiss-Berman. Our senior producer of the show is Nick White, and Darby Maloney is our editor. This episode was produced by Michael Catano and me, Shaka Mali, and engineered by Michael Catano. Production music is courtesy of HBO. You can listen to the next episode right after episode 3 of Succession, which comes out Sunday, October 31st on HBO Max.